Hello and thanks for joining us on African Broadcasting Network News. I'm Timi Otikiri. First, the main points. The Code of Conduct Tribunal sitting in Abuja yesterday adjourned hearing on the 16-count charge against the Senate President Dr. Bukola Saraki till June 15th. Kenya's main opposition party has rejected a government ban on political protest and has promised to make stronger calls for changes to the East African nation's electoral body. And sadly, one of African's football best-known figures and former coach of Nigeria's Super Eagles, Stephen Okechukwu Keshi, has died at the age of 54. Now the news in full. The Code of Conduct Tribunal (CCT) sitting in Abuja yesterday adjourned the hearing on the 16-count charge against the Senate President Dr. Bukola Saraki till June 15th. The Justice Danladi Umar-led panel adjourned the case for Saraki's defense to further cross-examine the star witness, Mr. Michael Wetkas. The adjournment came on a day the CCT chairman, Justice Umar, warned Saraki against using delay tactics to frustrate his trial. Shortly before, Saraki's lawyer, who is the defense counsel and the senior advocate of Nigeria, Paul Usoro, began to cross-examine the witness. Justice Umar said there was need for him to make some points clear to the defendant. He said it was imperative for him to warn the defendant that he would face the full consequences of the charges against him, despite whatever delay tactics he chose to employ in the course of the trial. The National Association of Resident Doctors of Nigeria, NARD, has threatened to commence a nationwide strike on Thursday, June the 9th. This was made known by the national president of the association, Dr. Mohammed Askira. Dr. Askira told newsmen in Kano on Tuesday that the decision was taken at the ordinary general meeting of the National Executive Council of the association held between May 30th and June 5th in Jos. He further said if by midnight of Sunday, June the 19th, their demands were not met, all members of the association, including those exempted, would join the indefinite nationwide strike. Askira said the association found it necessary to take the painful decision following the inability of the government to meet its demands. He said the association would continue to be open to discussions and ready to partner with government to ensure effective healthcare service delivery to Nigerians. Governor Ifeanyi Okowa of Delta State has condemned the actions of militants currently destroying oil installations in the Niger Delta area of Nigeria. Governor Okowa made the statement at the commissioning of the first phase of the overlay of the Jedo-Uwaton Road construction and construction of access roads to Eagle Heights University of Madino. The governor, whose state is one of those in the Niger Delta seriously affected by the militant activities, said the actions of the militants is not in the best interest of the state and the nation at large.
The kind of things going on in this state is not in the best interest of Delta State. The pipeline vandalism that is going on a regular basis is a big slap on Delta State, because we are the greatest losers. Our environment is impacted negatively, our economy is impacted negatively, and the communities themselves are impacted negatively.
He also encouraged those aggrieved to seek better ways of making their grievances known to the government, as taking laws into their hands is not a good way to make a point.
We must have a rethink. We may have issues, and I agree that there are issues with the federal government, that we cannot take laws into our hands. We cannot destroy ourselves in order to make a point. I believe that there are other ways to make such points, particularly so now that we are impacting very, very negatively on our environment, and we are sending a very wrong message out there in the Nigerian state.
Governor Okowa used the opportunity to plead with Deltans to give the state government more time to fulfill the promises made to them, as they are aware of the socio-economic challenges the people of the state are currently passing through.
I want to appeal to all our brothers who are involved in one manner or the other with the vandalization of our pipelines and oil facilities to please stop that process, and that it is better for us to find more appropriate ways of engaging with the federal government, so that we do that the government, under my watch, will continue to remain focused. The challenges are there. People have to be patient with us. We will do much more. We are also hoping that people will come to partner with us and to be patient. We know that things are tough, particularly for our young ones. But please do not take to an evil cause. Our youth must continue to stay cooperative and to find ways of engaging themselves in the right direction.
And now on to some business reports. Oil prices hit their highest in 8 months on Tuesday, buoyed by the dollar nearing 1 month lows and by falling Nigerian oil output after a spate of attacks on infrastructure. Brent crude futures were up 36 cents on the day at $50.91 a barrel, I beg your pardon, by 13:39 GMT, having hit an intraday peak of $51.30 earlier in the day, their highest since October. U.S. crude oil futures gained 32 cents to trade at $50.01 a barrel, having touched a fresh 2016 peak of $50.37, the highest also since October last year. The price of oil has nearly doubled since January, when it hit its lowest since late 2003, boosted largely by a spate of unplanned outages that have eroded production in Canada, Venezuela, Libya and Nigeria, along with a steady decline in higher cost U.S. shale output. Yet analysts say the rally may entice some shale production back online, potentially damaging the prospects for a major sustained price rise. According to reports, Nigeria's Bonny Light crude output is down by an estimated 170,000 barrels per day, following attacks on pipeline infrastructure. Oil, along with the rest of the commodities complex, has also been supported by a weaker dollar. U.S. commercial crude oil inventories fell by 3.5 million barrels last week, marking a third straight weekly drop, a preliminary Reuters poll showed. The data by the American Petroleum Institute API is due out at 20:30 GMT today. And now the Nigerian stock market has continued a decline trend, as declined by 0.45% to close trading yesterday. The market capitalization, which opened at 9.479 trillion naira, decreased by 43 billion naira to close at 9.436 trillion naira yesterday. Similarly, the all-share index depreciated by 123.06 or 0.45% to close at 27,475.48 on Tuesday. Analysts at Meristem Securities Limited attributed the losses recorded, I beg your pardon, yesterday to a rebirth of negative sentiments from investors following the gains accumulated during bargain hunting activities. Market breadth strengthened when compared to previous day, with 16 stocks advanced against 27 declining stocks. Owando led the gainers table with 10.16% to close at 6 naira 72 kobo, I beg your pardon, per share. NEM Insurance followed with a gain of 5% to close at 84 kobo, while Namath advanced by 4.88% to close at 86 kobo per share. Unity Bank gained 4.17% to close at 1 naira, and Honeywell Flour appreciated by 3.59% to close at 1 naira 73 kobo per share. And now to some foreign stories, and first to East Africa, where Kenya's main opposition party has rejected a government ban on political protest and has promised to make stronger calls for changes to the East African nation's electoral body. The Interior Secretary Joseph Nkaiseri on Tuesday outlawed demonstrations in the country after at least 5 people died in weekly rallies by supporters of the Coalition for Reforms and Democracy that began in April. He threatened to crack down on protesters until differences between the opposition and the government is resolved through negotiations. With the presidential elections that is scheduled for August 2017, the clashes between protesters and police have evoked memories of the political and ethnic conflict that erupted in Kenya after a disputed vote in 2007 and claimed at least 1,100 lives. The 71-year-old former Prime Minister Raila Odinga, who heads the CORD, poses the biggest political challenge to President Uhuru Kenyatta in the next year's ballot. Odinga disputed his loss in the last presidential vote in 2013. We'll go on a short break. More stories when we return. Stay with us.
Hello, I'm Shegun Mana, and we believe that entrepreneurship is something we must develop in Africa and indeed the developing economies of the world. That is why we have this program called Let's Talk Business on this station. We want you to watch because we sit down with entrepreneurs and they encourage you on how to develop your own entrepreneurship business. Keep watching Let's Talk Business on this station.
Imagine Africa. Let's Talk Business showing on the station.
Glad to have you back. You're still on to African Broadcasting Network News. Now, still on the foreign scene, the Iranian Foreign Ministry has issued a response to the visa request of 3 U.S. Republican lawmakers who had wanted to travel to Iran to monitor Tehran's compliance with last year's historic nuclear agreement. The letter noted that according to the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the International Atomic Energy Agency (IAEA) is the sole body competent for monitoring the implementation of the agreement's nuclear provisions. After Iran and 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, which are the United States, France, Britain, China, and Russia plus Germany, started implementing the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action (JCPOA) on January the 16th, all nuclear-related sanctions imposed on Iran by the European Union, the Security Council, and the US were lifted. Iran, in return, has put some limitation on its nuclear activities. It will be recalled that the nuclear agreement was signed on July 14, 2015, following nearly a decade of on and off intensive talks. Iraqi Prime Minister has fired the country's intelligence chief, the head of the state media, and chief executives of 6 state-owned banks amidst call to enact reforms within the political and economic establishments. Haider al-Abadi on Tuesday replaced Zuhair al-Galbawi, the chief of the Iraqi National Intelligence Service, with Mustafa Karhimi and Mohammed Abdul Jabbar al-Shabut at the head of Iraqi media network until now, was also replaced by Faisal Radi. Hundreds of Iraqis gathered in Baghdad's Tahrir Square in late evening on Tuesday, urging the containment of corruption and formation of technocrat government in the country. The establishment of such a government has been stalled by persistent differences in the Iraqi parliament, which has to endorse a newly proposed cabinet lineup by Abadi. Now let's join Mine Orushemone for some sports updates.
Thank you, Temi, and welcome to Sports Updates. Glasgow 2014 Commonwealth Games gold medalist Ese Brume has qualified for the Rio 2016 Olympic Games after meeting the 6.70 meter standard for the women's long jump at the finals of the Athletic Federation of Nigeria's Golden League. Brume leaped to a season's best of 6.83 meters at the Akure Golden League to seal her place in Rio. She had pursued the standard in the 3 previous Golden League outings. The 2015 All-African Games gold medalist jumped 6.54 meters in Abuja before leaping to a 6.60 meter in Shagamu. The 20-year-old also smashed her previous personal record of 6.68 meters, which she had set in the year 2014. The Athletics Federation of Nigeria (AFN) is expected to name athletes who will represent the country at the 2016 CAA African Senior Athletic Championship in Durban, South Africa after the Akure Golden League. The competition will hold from June 22nd to 26. In other events, Divine Oduduru won the men's 100 and 200 meter as he clocked 10.29 seconds and 20.53 seconds in the 2 events. Patient George won the women's 400 meters in 51.06 seconds, while Yinka Ajayi and Omolara Omotoshon finished second and third in 52.27 seconds and 52.61 seconds respectively. Former Chelsea doctor Ivan Kenero settled her case against the club and their ex-manager Jose Mourinho for an undisclosed sum on Tuesday, just as she seemed set to testify against them. After negotiations that saw lawyers scrubbing back and forth between 2 rooms at the London South Employment Tribunal in suburban Croydon, both sides reached a private agreement. Lawyer Daniel Stirling, representing Chelsea and Jose Mourinho, told the tribunal at a delayed hearing that eventually lasted no more than 2 minutes after the parties agreed to the settlement of the dispute on confidential terms. Kenero, who Chelsea said had rejected an offer of £1.2 million to settle her claims, has been due to start giving evidence on Tuesday in her case against the London club and Mourinho, who was appointed Manchester United new manager last month. She was pursuing a constructive dismissal case against Chelsea and a connected personal legal action against Mourinho, who left the Blues in December for alleged victimization and sexual discrimination. Colombia became the first team to reach the quarterfinals of the Copa America Quintanero on Tuesday after goals from Carlos Banca and James Rodriguez fired them to a 2-1 win over Paraguay in Group A. AC Milan striker Barca headed Colombia into the lead in the 12th minute before Real Madrid star Rodriguez doubled the Colombia tally with a low shot on the half-hour mark. Vitor Ayala scored a goal for Paraguay in the 71st minute, but their second half fight back came short. Colombia is undefeated in Group A so far following its win over host the United States last week. With 1 game remaining against Costa Rica this weekend, Colombia are assured of a top 2 finish and a place in the last 8. In the other game played, USA trashed Costa Rica 4-2, and in the early hours of Thursday, Brazil will take on Haiti while Ecuador will host Peru. Well, this one is a very sad one coming from Nigeria. One of Africa's best known figures and former coach of the Nigerian Super Eagles, Stephen Keshi, has died at the age of 54. A former captain of the Nigerian national team, Keshi was one of only 2 men to win the African Cup of Nations, both as a player and as a coach. He also managed Togo and Mali, and his playing career included a spell for Belgian club side Anderlecht. As a player, Kechi was part of the Super Eagles team that won the Nations Cup in 1994 and narrowly missed out on a World Cup quarter-final place that same year. Keshi coached the national side over 3 spells, leading Nigeria to the 2013 Nations Cup title in South Africa and the last 16 at the 2014 World Cup in Brazil. His contract was not renewed after the World Cup, but he later returned on a match-by-match deal following the team's failure to reach the 2015 Nations Cup finals. He was then sacked as caretaker coach, but reinstated after intervention from the Nigerian President Goodluck Jonathan. He was sacked for a final time last July. According to reports, he is thought to have suffered a heart attack. Well, with that sad story about Keshi, that's all on Sports Update. We now join Timmy for the rest of the news. Bye from me.
Thanks, Mire. And with the sports update, we'll come to the end of our news bulletin. But before we go, we'll take a look at our headlines. The Code of Conduct Tribunal sitting in Abuja yesterday adjourned hearing on the 16-count charge against the Senate President Dr. Bukola Saraki till June 15th. Kenya's main opposition party has rejected a government ban on political protest and has promised to make stronger calls for changes to the East African nation's electoral body. And we also told you that one of Africa's football best-known figures and former coach of Nigeria's Super Eagles, Stephen Keshi, died at the age of 54. On behalf of the African Broadcasting Network News Crew, we would like to sympathize with all Nigerians, and especially the family of former Super Eagles coach Stephen Keshi, who died in the early hours of this morning. May his soul rest in perfect peace. Now, thanks for staying with us on African Broadcasting Network News. I'm Timmy Otikiri saying, do stay tuned to more programs on ABN. Have a good day.